As to count 1 in CR 2021-001704, the court orders you to be sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 25 calendar years. This sentence would run consecutively to the District Court of the 7th Judicial District of the State of Idaho in Fremont County, case number CR 22-21-1624. As to count 1 in CR 001-242-001, it's ordered that you be sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 25 calendar years. That sentence also, due to the number of victims you've created in the 2 cases, the immeasurable harm you've inflicted on many, it's ordered that that run consecutive to CR 2021-001-704. Because these sentences are consecutive to one another and consecutive to the Idaho case in which you are currently serving a sentence, you're giving 0 days credit for time served. You have the right to appeal from the orders of the court and to have a lawyer represent you. If you cannot afford a lawyer, one will be appointed for you. If instead you want to represent yourself in your appeal, you must file a written waiver no later than 30 days after the filing of your notice of appeal. If you cannot afford copies of the necessary records and transcripts, they would be provided for you at no cost. If you want to appeal, you must file a notice of appeal within 20 days of today, or you lose that right.
That was the judge reading out the sentencing for Lord Vallow Daybell, a doomsday woman who held the entire country on chokehold for over 4 years. What would make a mother? One seen as loving, spiritual, and devoted. Turn her back on her family, her children, and the very values she claimed to cherish.
Very important to me, and a good wife and a good worker, and being all those things together is not easy. So I'm basically a ticking time bomb.
How does a smiling suburban mom become the face of one of America's most shocking murder cases? This is a story of Lori Vallow Daybell, a woman whose life began like so many others but spiraled into a storm of death, deception, and fanaticism. A story that has left the nation asking, how far can blind belief and manipulation go before it turns deadly? Lori Vallow's life was marked by a series of failed relationships long before this nightmare unfolded. By the time she reached her late 30s, Lori had already been married 4 times. She had a daughter, Tylee Ryan, from a previous marriage. But her last marriage, to Charles Vallow, would become a flashpoint for a chain of tragic events. Charles Vallow adored Lori. He was a hardworking father figure to both Tylee and to Joshua J.J. Vallow, a young boy with autism whom they adopted in 2013. To their neighbors and friends, they looked like the picture of a loving family. But behind closed doors, cracks were forming.
My truck had gone from the airport. She went to the airport and got it.
So what makes her a danger to herself and to others?
She threatened me, murder me, kill me.
She threatened to murder you?
Yes.
And she's talking in a spirit,
I will kill you.
Spiritual.
No, she's talking physically. I will kill you because you're not Charles, and nobody will care.
So she at this point doesn't think you are her husband?
She thinks I'm Mick Schneider.
Who's Mick Schneider?
I have no idea.
Okay.
It's the name she used. I don't know where it came from.
Lori had begun to change emotionally and spiritually. She grew obsessed with extreme religious teachings, particularly those connected to Chad Daybell, a self-proclaimed doomsday author she met in 2018. The story takes a darker turn with the involvement of Lori's brother, Alex Cox. Known for his loyalty to Lori, Alex would become a central figure in this tragedy. In July 2019, an altercation at Lori's home in Chandler, Arizona, ended with Charles Vallow shot dead by Alex. Alex claimed self-defense.
Okay, just have a seat right there. Let's get FD in here. Yeah. Have a seat.
Yeah. 18 feet secure. We got the gentleman out.
You have some ID on you, sir?
Yeah.
What happened today? How did it get to this?
I don't know. He was enraged.
What's going on? What happened?
Oh. He was talking with my sister earlier.
No, what happened today, though? Like, just in the last 20 minutes?
He came at me with a bat.
Okay. Was he living here or
No.
visiting?
He came to pick up his son.
Okay, is the son inside?
No. My sister took him to school.
Okay, so it was just you at the house?
Yes.
And he came, how long, what time did he come to pick up the son?
I don't know, 20 minutes ago maybe.
Okay, so you know who he is, let him in?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I think they were talking earlier, then she left, and then he got into it with me.
Like what? What do you mean?
I don't know. He was accusing me of at me.
Okay. What was he yelling at you about?
About my sister because I've broken up the tussle with them earlier. And he told me not to interfere anymore with them or I'd pay. And he came at me with a bat.
Okay, so he showed up in the house with a bat in his hand?
No.
Okay, so
There was a scuffle earlier with my sister and my niece. My niece got involved.
about earlier meaning earlier this week, earlier this morning?
Just this morning, before they left.
Before your wife left?
My sister.
Before your sister left?
saying Charles came at him with a baseball bat. But investigators later questioned this narrative. What shocked many was Lori's reaction. Instead of mourning, she seemed eerily calm. Neighbors reported that, just hours after Charles's death, Lori hosted a pool party at her home. No signs of grief, no tears, just laughter and a casual atmosphere.
So yeah, if you can just kind of tell me kind of what happened. It sounds like some of this may have started last night or something along those lines.
Right.
So start where you think it makes the most sense.
Okay, so, I
told you, it's a crazy question.
Well, he's always mad at me, right?
Okay.
And he doesn't want a divorce, but I don't like him and don't want to deal with him, so that's just how it is. So we married for 14 years, we dealt with it for 14 years, of him being horrible to her.
Me and him have always kind of not gotten along, like just since I was little. And so there have been a few times that we've gotten in fights and stuff like that, and so so I'm just kind of always scared of that.
Yeah.
He came over in the morning and he's like banging on the door. I'm like, oh great, here we go, And I was just gonna be nice. I was gonna be nice as possible, and I had JJ stuff all ready for school. And so,
Do you remember about what time we got there?
he said he'd be there 7:30, but it was more like 7:40ish
Okay.
or 7:35. I don't know.
Okay.
But I remember thinking, looking at the clock, and he wasn't there at 7:30, and he's usually Mr.
Yeah.
on
Punctual.
time. Yes. So I was like, okay. He was just being real smirky and real like jerky, to me, and I was like ignoring him, whatever. And so he was like,
And your brother lives there with you?
No,
Okay.
he had stayed with me last night because I was worried he was going to come over and
Okay.
cause trouble with me.
Okay.
And just wanted someone else there, like my brother there, because I trust my brother. And
So this morning he comes back in and...
he comes back in, I wouldn't give him his phone. He was screaming at me to give him his phone. He was very worried about whatever was on his text that he did not want me to see. And so I was just holding it there, and he was screaming at me. And I was kind of walking around the house with it, so he...
As if nothing had happened. It was the first sign that Lori's sense of reality and morality had shifted into something chillingly detached. After Charles's death, Lori's behavior became even more erratic. She moved her children from Arizona to Idaho, where Chad Daybell lived. By September 2019, both Tylee Ryan, 16, and J.J. Vallow, 7, vanished without explanation.
Chad, where are Lori's kids? What happened to Tammy, Chad? Can you tell us what happened to Tammy? Why have you guys been in Hawaii for so long? Listen, just tell people what's happening. There's people around the country praying for your children, praying for you guys. Why don't you give us answers?
That's great.
That's great. That's great that they're praying for you, praying for your kids. What? You have nothing to say? Did you do something to your children? Are your children still alive? That's a simple question. I've got 3 kids of my own. I can tell you every minute where my kids are at. Where are your children? What do you guys plan to do now? You have 5 days to get your children in front of a judge in Rexburg, then what? Are you guys innocent of any crimes? Have you committed any crimes? Chad, you guys have a lot to say on your podcast. You don't have anything to say now? Lori?
The last known sighting of Tylee was on September 8th, 2019, during a family trip to Yellowstone National Park. J.J. was last seen on September 22nd, 2019, at his school in Rexburg, Idaho. Not long after, Lori withdrew J.J. from school and told everyone that her children were safe, though she refused to let anyone see them. Family members grew alarmed, especially Kay Woodcock, J.J.'s grandmother. Kay and her husband made frantic calls to police, demanding welfare checks. But Lori stonewalled investigators at every turn. She refused to provide proof of life for her children. Instead, she packed her bags and left Idaho. While the nation prayed and hoped for Tylee and J.J.'s safe return, Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell escaped to Hawaii in late 2019. Photos emerged of them laughing on the beach, sipping drinks, and posing for wedding pictures. Yes, just weeks after Chad's wife, Tammy Daybell, died suddenly in October 2019. Lori married Chad on November 5, 2019. The timing was shocking. Tammy's death, initially ruled natural, raised suspicions. When investigators exhumed Tammy's body in December 2019, her cause of death was reclassified as homicide by asphyxiation. The question was clear. Did Chad murder his wife to start a new life with Lori? By early 2020, the story of the missing children had become national news. The case captured the country's attention, not just because of the children's disappearance, but because of Lori's bizarre behavior. In interviews and court appearances, Lori seemed indifferent, even mocking the authorities and the media. Her silence about her children's whereabouts was deafening. The case reached its darkest chapter on June 9, 2020, when police executed a search warrant at Chad Daybell's property in Rexburg, Idaho.
In a couple of boxes, a couple of children's bikes, and in the winter clothing, there was a couple personalized blankets that had the pictures, looked like family pictures that were sewn onto the blankets.
After months of searching and fearing the worst, investigators found the remains of Tylee and J.J. buried in shallow graves in Chad's backyard. The discovery was horrifying. J.J. Vallow was found wrapped in black plastic and duct tape, his small body hidden as if disposable. Tylee Ryan's remains were burned, dismembered, and mixed with animal bones to obscure the truth.
Underneath the white rocks was some thin wood paneling.
Okay. And what did you observe them do with that paneling?
They removed the paneling.
Okay. And then what did you observe?
Initially, as soon as they removed the paneling, I could smell the odor of a decomposing body. Once they removed some soil, there was a black, what I can best describe as a black plastic bag with a round object protruding through the dirt.
Okay. What did you observe the ER team do after you saw that?
They dug a little bit more around the round object, which appeared to me to be the crown of a head, protruding through the dirt. They used a small, sharp instrument to cut through the black plastic.
Okay. And what did you observe when they did that?
There was a white plastic underneath the black plastic, and they also used the white instrument to cut through the white plastic.
Okay. And what did you observe when they did that?
I observed what looked to be brown human hair.
Okay.
It was what appeared to be a small body tightly wrapped in black plastic, covered in duct tape.
Okay.
I'm pointing to a fire pit on Mr. Daybell's property, just northwest of the fire pit. There is what we've referred to the pet cemetery, and it's just north of the pet cemetery where I helped excavate.
What did you observe?
I had been away from that area, but when I returned to that area, they had already dug down and located what appeared to be a mass of burnt flesh and charred bone.
The nation's prayers had turned to collective grief and outrage. How could a mother, someone entrusted with the care of her children, be linked to such cruelty? With Tammy's murder confirmed, the narrative became even more chilling. Chad Daybell, the man who preached about the end of the world, had not only buried Lori's children on his property, but had also allegedly killed his own wife. And what did Lori do? She married him almost immediately, as if death was nothing more than an inconvenience on their path to a prophesied future. Lori Vallow Daybell has since been convicted of the murders of her children and Tammy Daybell. She is serving life in prison without the possibility of parole. Chad Daybell, meanwhile, faces his own trial and is already convicted of triple murder, now awaiting a death sentence after his appeal. But their trials were about more than just crimes. They revealed the dangerous power of manipulation and fanaticism. Lori's friends testified about how Chad's teachings brainwashed her. He convinced her that people, sometimes even her own children, were dark spirits who needed to be removed. A mother, a brother, a doomsday preacher, a story of love twisted into obsession, and faith warped into a weapon. The murders of Tylee Ryan and J.J. Vallow have left the world shaken. What will history remember about this case? How will future generations look at a mother who walked away from everything, including her own children, for the promise of a false prophecy? Their story is far from over. Chad Daybell's appeal looms, and the questions remain. Were there more secrets? More lies? Could anyone have stopped them before it was too late? If you're as shaken by this story as the rest of America, don't stay silent. Like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Let's keep the memory of Tylee and J.J. alive, and let this story be a warning. When belief becomes blind, lives are lost. What happens when a smiling, picture-perfect mother turns into the centerpiece of one of the most chilling murder cases in modern America? How does a devoted parent, someone who once called her children miracles, become accused of orchestrating their deaths? This is the story of Vallow Daybell, a woman whose life seemed ordinary until it wasn't. Alex Cox was born on June 26, 1973, in sunny Loma Linda, California. By all accounts, she had a childhood that gave no hint of the darkness to come. Friends from high school remember her as bubbly, beautiful, and devoted to her faith. She was a cheerleader, a girl next door. Nothing stood out until her life choices began to raise questions. Why was Lori married so many times? By her late 30s, she'd been through multiple marriages, and drama followed each one. By 2006, Lori was married to Charles Vallow, a hardworking and devoted man. Together, they had a blended family. Lori's teenage daughter, Tylee Ryan, was full of life, a teenager with big dreams. Then came Joshua J.J. Vallow, a sweet, energetic 7-year-old boy with autism, whom Lori and Charles lovingly adopted. To outsiders, they looked like the perfect suburban family. But was it all just a facade? By 2018, Lori's life took a bizarre turn. She met Chad Daybell, a religious author who preached about doomsday prophecies and dark spirits. Chad wasn't just writing fiction. He believed he was chosen by God to prepare people for the end times. Lori, captivated by his teaching, started claiming she could see who was possessed by dark spirits, even labeling people zombies. Could these beliefs have planted the seed for what would soon become an unthinkable tragedy? In July 2019, Lori's once loving marriage with Charles collapsed. Charles feared for his life. He told friends and family that Lori was not the same person, and that she believed he had been taken over by an evil spirit. He even emailed law enforcement and sought help. But no one could have predicted what came next. On the morning of July 11, 2019, Charles Vallow was shot and killed inside Lori's home in Chandler, Arizona. The shooter? Lori's brother, Alex Cox, who claimed he fired in self-defense. But the details were odd, almost staged. Why did Lori throw a pool party later that day? Why did she calmly order her children breakfast while their stepfather's body lay in the next room? Was this really self-defense or something far more sinister? Just months later, Lori and Chad were seen together in Hawaii, smiling, laughing, and planning a future. What shocked the world was that both of Chad's children and Lori's 2 kids, Tylee and J.J., were nowhere to be found. On October 19, 2019, Chad's wife, Tammy Daybell, died suddenly in her sleep. At first, no one questioned it. Tammy was buried without an autopsy. Just weeks later, on November 5, 2019, Lori married Chad in Hawaii. Why the rush? Why did they both act like nothing had happened? And most importantly, where were the children? By this point, the questions were piling up. A dead husband, a dead wife, 2 missing children, and a couple who believed the end of the world was just around the corner. In the next chapter, we'll dive into the twisted belief system that fueled this nightmare, and the chilling messages that hinted at the children's fate. Chapter 2, Love and Doomsday. Narrator voiceover. They described it as divine destiny. But was their bond spiritual salvation, or a twisted plot fueled by apocalyptic delusions? This chapter peels back the layers of the belief system that tied Lori and Chad together and set in motion a tragic chain of events. Unlikely meeting and a shared vision. In October 2018, Lori Vallow attended a doomsday preparation conference in Utah called Preparing People. Among the speakers was Chad Daybell, a self-published author whose novels and sermons centered on apocalyptic prophecies. According to witnesses, Lori was immediately captivated. Chad told her they had been married in multiple past lives. He even referred to her as Elena, his wife in a former incarnation. Their conversations revolved around dark spirits, zombies, and spiritual vibrations. Lori came to believe she was a goddess with a divine mission to lead 144,000 chosen ones into the end times. Chad claimed he had lived 31 past lives. Lori believed she had lived 21, 5 of them with Chad. To them, humanity was divided into light and dark souls, with the dark souls considered possessed and beyond saving. For Chad and Lori, some people weren't just dark, they were zombies, bodies overtaken by evil spirits. Their inner circle, including Lori's brother Alex Cox and friend Zulema Pastines, conducted spiritual castings aimed at expelling these spirits. But they believed that death might be the only way to truly release someone from that darkness. Chillingly, investigators later found text messages where Lori and Chad described taking care of those they believed were zombies. Even Lori's children, Tylee and J.J., were referred to as zombies in their private messages. On October 9, 2019, Tammy Daybell, Chad's wife, reported being attacked in her driveway by a masked man with what she thought was a paintball gun. She survived shaken, but no one was arrested. Just 10 days later, on October 19, 2019, Tammy was found dead in her home. At first, her death was attributed to natural causes. Chad told family members that Tammy had been battling health problems, like seizures, but her medical history didn't fully support those claims. Her funeral was scheduled within days, and Chad's lack of visible grief raised eyebrows among friends and family. In December 2019, authorities exhumed Tammy's body. The results were damning. Tammy had died by asphyxiation due to suffocation, a homicide, not natural causes. The autopsy revealed bruising consistent with being restrained or smothered. This discovery added another name to the growing list of suspicious deaths tied to Lori and Chad. Prosecutors would later argue that the couple's motives went beyond spiritual beliefs. There was money to be gained. Life insurance payouts from Tammy's death and Social Security benefits for Lori's children. Chad's obsession with end-times prophecies also played a central role. He had predicted the world would end in July 2020 and believed that he and Lori were chosen to lead a new Zion. Investigators pieced together a disturbing picture from text messages, emails, and phone records. Lori, Chad, and Alex Cox were discussing removing those who were dark. Cell phone data placed Alex Cox near Tammy's property on the night of her suspicious drive-by incident, and again on the night she died. Zulema Pastines, a close friend of Lori's, later testified that Lori had a tense phone call on the night of Tammy's death, calling someone an idiot and saying he can't do anything by himself, implying Alex's involvement. In late November 2019, just weeks after Tammy's death, Lori and Chad left Idaho for Hawaii. It was as if they were running from something. On November 5, 2019, barely 2 weeks after Tammy was buried, Lori and Chad were married on a Kauai beach. But there was a far bigger question hanging over them. Were Tylee and J.J. extended family members, including J.J.'s grandmother Kay Woodcock, grew desperate for answers. Police began asking questions Lori refused to answer. By early 2020, investigators had gathered compelling evidence. Lori had removed and abandoned the children's personal belongings, including their medications. Security footage and storage unit records showed Lori and Alex moving boxes, children's bikes, and clothing, but never the children themselves. Phone pings and digital records indicated suspicious trips Alex Cox made around Chad's property in September 2019, the same time frame when the children vanished. In June 2020, a search warrant led authorities to Chad's backyard. What they uncovered shocked the nation. The remains of 16-year-old Tylee Ryan and 7-year-old J.J. Vallow were buried in shallow graves. Tylee's body had been dismembered and burned, while J.J. was found wrapped in plastic with duct tape. The discovery confirmed what many had feared. The children were dead, and the couple's doomsday beliefs had turned deadly. Lori and Chad were arrested, charged with murder, and thrust into the spotlight. But how did investigators piece together the puzzle? What clues and confessions exposed the couple's lies? In Chapter 3, we'll follow the relentless investigation, the digital breadcrumbs, the shocking testimonies, and the moment when the world learned what really happened to Tylee and J.J. How did investigators finally piece together the truth behind Lori and Chad's disappearances and suspected murders? What digital breadcrumbs and grim discoveries made the world sit up and take notice? This chapter follows the relentless detective work and stark revelations that transformed a missing children case into a homicide investigation. When Tylee Ryan and J.J. Vallow were not seen after late September 2019, their disappearance sparked growing concern. Family members repeatedly called law enforcement. Investigators launched welfare checks in November 2019, only to find the children nowhere to be found. With no word from their mother and rising fears from relatives, especially J.J.'s grandmother, Kay Woodcock, police began to suspect that something terrible had happened. It wasn't just that the children were missing. Lori's evasiveness was alarming. During a welfare check in Rexburg, Idaho, she told police that J.J. was with a family friend in Arizona. That was a lie. The friend had no idea where the boy was. This marked the beginning of a deeper, more aggressive investigation. While Lori and Chad escaped to Hawaii, investigators collected evidence from Lori's iCloud accounts and cell phones. More than 130,000 records were reviewed. Within them were cryptic and chilling messages. Lori and Chad discussed people being dark spirits and needing to be removed. There were repeated references to the children in these terms, as well as mentions of a plan that needed to be executed. One email stood out. Chad had told a real estate agent in Hawaii that he and Lori had no children. By then, Tylee and J.J. had not been seen for weeks. Investigators suspected they were already dead. A critical breakthrough came when investigators analyzed cell phone location data for Lori's brother, Alex Cox. His movements painted a disturbing picture. His phone pinged near Tammy Daybell's home during the late-night paintball incident she reported on October 9, 2019. His phone was in the vicinity of Chad's property on multiple key dates, specifically on September 9th and 23rd, 2019, the days following the children's last known sightings. These data points would later become vital evidence, suggesting that Alex was directly involved in the disposal of the children's remains. For nearly 9 months, the world watched and waited as the children remained missing. Then on June 9, 2020, police executed a search warrant on Chad Daybell's property in Rexburg, Idaho. Teams of investigators, cadaver dogs, and forensic experts descended on the property, under a patch of disturbed ground, where Chad had once claimed to have buried a pet. They began digging. The smell of decomposition hit them almost immediately. First, they found the body of 7-year-old J.J. Vallow. He was wrapped tightly in black plastic and duct tape. Just feet away, buried in another shallow grave, were the remains of 16-year-old Tylee Ryan. Her body had been burned, dismembered, and mixed with animal bones to obscure the crime. It was one of the most heartbreaking discoveries imaginable. Investigators meticulously documented every inch of the scene. They collected tools from Chad's shed, shovels, a pickaxe, and tested them for DNA. Partial DNA from Tylee was found on some of the tools. A hair found stuck to the duct tape used to bind J.J. was matched to Lori Vallow. The coroner's findings were damning. J.J. had died from asphyxiation, likely with a plastic bag. Tylee's cause of death could not be conclusively determined due to the severe burning and dismemberment, but the manner of death was ruled homicide. Every forensic detail tied back to the couple and their inner circle, which included Alex Cox. The case took an even more emotional turn when Lori's eldest son, Colby Ryan, confronted his mother. In a recorded phone call later played in court, Colby accused her of knowing all along that Tylee and J.J. were dead. His voice trembled with anger and betrayal. "You lied to me, Mom. You killed my siblings." Colby's testimony, and his raw heartbreak, became one of the most haunting elements of the trials. His words gave the children a voice when they no longer had one. By mid-2020, the pieces were coming together. Cell phone records placed Alex Cox exactly where the bodies were buried. Text messages between Lori and Chad referenced the children as dark and zombies. Lori had stopped responding to welfare checks, instead fleeing to Hawaii with Chad. Witnesses, including Lori's friend Melanie Gibb, told investigators about bizarre conversations where Lori claimed her children had become zombies. All of this painted a chilling portrait of premeditated murder fueled by apocalyptic beliefs. In February 2020, before the bodies were found, Lori was arrested in Hawaii on charges of desertion and non-support of her children. She refused to reveal their whereabouts even while jailed. When the remains were discovered in June 2020, the charges escalated to first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Chad was arrested the same day the graves were found. Police pulled him over near his home after he had been seen watching the excavation with binoculars from his car. Both Lori and Chad were indicted on multiple counts, including murder, conspiracy, and grand theft. Prosecutors built their case on 3 pillars: digital evidence, text messages, emails, and cell phone pings; forensics, DNA matches, autopsy reports, and tools linked to the burial; witness testimony from family, friends, and cult-like associates who revealed the couple's beliefs about dark spirits. The indictments laid bare a disturbing blend of fanaticism and cold calculation. Lori and Chad's claims of preparing for the end times could not explain why 2 innocent children were buried in shallow graves. With bodies recovered and evidence mounting, the question shifted. Would justice prevail? In the next chapter, we'll step inside the courtroom, where shocking testimonies, a death sentence for Chad, and multiple life terms for Lori would forever define the end of this doomsday saga. With the bodies discovered and charges firmly in place, the case hurtled into courtrooms across 2 states. This chapter enters that arena, where juries' legal strategy and shocking testimony determined whether justice would touch those who once escaped it. On April 10, 2024, the state of Idaho began its prosecution of Chad Daybell for the murders of his wife, Tammy, and Lori's children. Tylee and J.J. opening statements framed Chad as a man driven by hunger for power, wealth, and prophetic importance. Prosecutors emphasized his apocalyptic beliefs and alleged financial motives. Defense counsel tried to portray him as a spiritually driven figure manipulated by Vallow Daybell. After a month of testimony, the jury deliberated for just over a day. On May 30th, 2024, they found Chad guilty of all first-degree murder charges. During sentencing, Chad waived his right to present mitigating evidence. On June 1st, 2024, the jury imposed the death penalty. He also received concurrent sentences, 15 years for insurance fraud and restitution of approximately $430,000. Chad was transferred to death row at the Idaho Maximum Security Institution and immediately filed an appeal to the state Supreme Court. Meanwhile, Lori stood trial in Idaho for the murders and conspiracy related to those killings. Her trial commenced on April 3rd, 2023. During the proceedings, she did not testify or call witnesses. The prosecution called about 60 witnesses, including former friends who described her spiritual obsession, disturbing messages, and denunciations of dissenters as zombies. Pictures of the children's remains were shown in court, leaving jurors visibly shaken. After deliberation, Lori was found guilty on May 12, 2023, of murdering her children and conspiring to kill Tammy Daybell. On July 31, 2023, she was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole in Idaho. Extradited to Arizona, Lori faced 2 additional trials, each tied to separate murder plots. Conspiracy to murder her estranged husband, Charles Vallow. Jury selection began on March 31, 2025. Despite not being a lawyer, Lori chose to represent herself, challenging the system with unorthodox tactics. Her brother, Adam Cox, testified that Lori had conspired with their brother Alex to kill Charles so she could collect a $1 million life insurance policy. On April 22, 2025, after just 3 hours of jury deliberation, Lori was convicted of conspiring to murder Charles. Conspiracy to murder Brandon Boudreaux, her niece's ex-husband. Jury selection began May 29, 2025. Lori again represented herself, even as the trial saw multiple delays due to her claims of illness. On opening day, June 5, 2025, prosecutors detailed how she allegedly provided her Jeep to Alex Cox, who then fired shots at Boudreaux from the vehicle. On June 12, 2025, Lori was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder in the Boudreaux case, despite her repeated attempt to argue that she was the victim of religious persecution. On July 25, 2025, Lori received 2 additional life sentences in Arizona for the Charles and Boudreaux conspiracies. These sentences were ordered to run consecutively, stacking on top of her Idaho life terms. Judge Justin Beresky stated that Lori should never be released, criticizing her for her attempts to disrupt the court and for using religious beliefs to justify violence. Throughout her Arizona trials, Lori's courtroom conduct made headlines. She frequently clashed with Judge Beresky, demanded his recusal multiple times, and argued that her spiritual beliefs were misunderstood. Jurors reported that Lori often smiled or laughed during testimony, showing little sign of remorse. Her decision to represent herself was risky. At times she rambled during cross-examinations and struggled to counter the evidence presented against her. Yet, she remained adamant that her faith and visions were being persecuted rather than her crimes being judged. Victims' families delivered powerful statements during sentencing. Colby Ryan, Lori's eldest son, told the court that his mother had destroyed his trust and shattered their family. "I believe Lori Vallow herself is the tragedy of this family," he said. Brandon Boudreaux spoke about living in fear after surviving the shooting, describing how his life was forever changed. Charles Vallow's sons also gave emotional statements, expressing anger that their father's murder had been treated so casually by someone who once claimed to love him. Lori has since filed appeals in both Idaho and Arizona, claiming violations of her rights and misconduct during trial. Chad Daybell has also appealed his death sentence, seeking a review by Idaho's Supreme Court. But for now, the weight of the law is clear. Lori is serving multiple consecutive life terms, and Chad remains on death row. From courtroom theatrics to gut-wrenching victim testimony, these trials mark the end of one chapter. But what comes next? What lessons can be drawn from this case? And how are the families of Tylee, J.J., Charles, and Tammy coping with their loss? In Chapter 5, we'll examine the aftermath, the appeals, the public's reaction, and how this case has forever changed the conversation about belief, manipulation, and justice. In the wake of Lori Vallow Daybell's final sentencing on July 25, 2025, Arizona prosecutors declared a closing chapter of a long legal saga. Judges declared that her additional life sentences should run consecutively, ensuring she spends the remainder of her life in prison. One judge remarked, "It will take an act of God for you to ever go free." He called her manipulation and planning unparalleled in his judicial career. But the litigation doesn't end there. In Idaho, Lori's legal team has filed an appeal challenging her 2023 conviction on multiple constitutional grounds, including alleged juror bias and improper admission of evidence. Chad Daybell has also appealed his death sentence to the Idaho Supreme Court, setting the stage for months, perhaps years, of legal review. This case has gripped the nation in a way few trials have. From coast to coast, Americans followed breathless updates on the doomsday mom, the missing children, and the shadowy web of extremist beliefs. Newsrooms were flooded with emails. True crime podcasts dissected every text message and courtroom moment. Jurors described being shaken by photographs of the children's remains and the religious rhetoric that prosecutors say was weaponized to justify murder. As of July 2025, Lori Vallow Daybell remains incarcerated, serving multiple consecutive life sentences in both Idaho and Arizona. Chad Daybell sits on death row in Idaho, pending appeal of a sentence. Legal appeals continue, ensuring this case remains alive in courtrooms and public debate. This was no ordinary crime. It was a tragedy born of belief, manipulation, and calculated cruelty, played out on a national stage. The story of Lori and Chad Daybell has shaken America and raised essential questions. How do we spot dangerous ideologies before they turn deadly? How do families, faith communities, and legal systems respond? And how many more Lori Vallows are out there, cultivating darkness under cloaks of righteousness? What can we do now? Talk, share information with friends and family about how extremist beliefs can mask serious harm. Educate, support mental health awareness and signs